Good afternoon, everyone. We're just waiting another minute to have everyone complete the entry to the meeting. I think I can make a start. We are just few seconds. Okay, welcome to our final edition of Great Change, Great Women. And it's an absolute pleasure and privilege. We've left the best for last. So we've got our good dear friend Caroline Casey. She needs no introduction. Everybody knows Caroline. But it's nice to have her on our humble show that she's obviously done so much over the past 2-3 years, which she's going to tell us about it. Before I do that, I'm going to let Anna just do the basic housekeeping, and then we can start grilling Caroline for all the work she's done and what she wants to do in the future and how the world is going to be a better place because of her. Over to you, Anna.
And you're definitely going to let me this time ask Caroline some questions now. Right?
I didn't promise. I didn't promise.
You can ask the difficult ones, but
Okay.
I've got my questions. So housekeeping section is there will be a Q&A at the end, so please put any questions in the chat. Please be respectful to all others. We want everyone to feel welcome, safe, and able to express themselves freely. Our accessibility features are a captioning service by MyClearText. Thank you, MyClearText. You've been wonderful throughout the 2 series. We have to remember to talk slower than usual, though, which is quite hard for me because I talk really fast, and we know that Caroline has a speed of a rocket. So switch on captioning at the bottom of the Zoom screen if you need it. Select closed captioning and then show subtitles, and you can follow the conversation with hashtag Great Change, Great Women on social media. And now I'm going to give just a quick bio before we launch into our questions. Yeah, it's very short, Caroline, don't panic. It's just, so Caroline is the businesswoman and activist behind the Valuable 500, the world's largest CEO collective and business move for disability inclusion. Caroline launched the movement at the World Economic Forum's Davos Summit in 2019, and since then has signed up over 500 multinational organizations with a combined revenue of over 8 trillion, employing 20 million people worldwide to radically transform the business system. The membership includes 36 of the FTSE 100 companies, 46 of the Fortune 500, and 28 of the Nikkei. Recently appointed president of the IAPB, Caroline also sits on several diversity and inclusion boards to include L'Oreal and Sky, and is a much sought after speaker. Well, she's everywhere, basically. And everywhere I go, I see Caroline. So yes, you're like a superstar, you are. Caroline has received an honorary doctorate as well as multiple awards and accolades for her work as a disability activist.
That's not short. I hate to tell you.
It is short.
It's really not short. Anna, the best way to describe me, if you have to give a bio, is I'm just a troublemaker. And the reason I'm everywhere is I've been hustling, right, Nasser? Like, that is what I've been doing. I've been hustling for 2.5 years.
Hustling, and you've been hustling very well.
I don't think anyone hustles as lovely as you do.
Yeah,
there's
right.
a warm hug at the end of it that they can't resist. And I tell you what, you've got such a charismatic personality. You don't even know about it.
No.
I've attended meetings where the royalties were present, and they were like in the palm of your hand. So don't underestimate yourself. So I wouldn't say that if I didn't mean it. Honestly, you're an awesome lady, and I'm so delighted you accepted our invitation. And we've got loyal followers to these events, and they're all here, and they are also game changers in their own right. So thank you for coming, and welcome to our little show. So please,
yes,
Anna, you start with your first question.
Yes. So, Caroline, unless you've got something else to say off script, no?
Who,
Oh,
me?
well, I'm going to go off. We're all going to go off script. There's nothing worse than being on two on
You
script.
know it.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Sure.
Every single time we do this, every single show, we go completely off piste, and we, you know, I get lots of messages behind the scenes saying, you know, get back on the script, get back on the questions.
No,
Anyway,
but Caroline, you can't, because it's so much to ask, and you can't do it in 1 hour. So she's going to have a free reign on what she wants to talk about, and we're just going to sit down and be mesmerized. Go on then. Ask one question. So,
what do you spend most of your time doing during lockdown? Oh, well, we're nearly out of it. Now that you can't easily fly around the world as usual, because usually you are here, there, and everywhere. And that must have been quite a shock.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I was exhausted by the time lockdown came, and I was about to start a 3-month honeymoon period. No, genuinely go on my honeymoon.
Oh, right.
Oh, you got married?
Congratulations.
Yeah, I got married in 2000. And
You're married, you're happy.
Yeah.
It's shining.
So, well, the thing is, so to answer that question, I spent time with the man I married. And, you know, we've been locked down, and there is an awful lot that has been incredibly difficult and incredibly painful, particularly in my family and stuff around lockdown and COVID. But then on the other side of it is I caught up with myself, and I have spent time with my family. We adopted 2 puppies. And the other thing is I have been able to exercise outside, which has been I've always been fit. It's been a thing I've needed in my life, but to be able to do that now outside and not in a hotel room. And I've been swimming in the Irish Sea every few days. And can I just say, I've been cooking and eating and trying to catch up with myself. I think that's the best way I know how, is that there has been incredible power in the pause for me. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, you deserved it, because I mean, you dedicated several years of your life to this campaign and this, you know, this purpose. So I want to just a brief background. What was your entry point into the world of disability inclusion?
Well, there's been a few points, but the one that's best known is when I eventually came out of the disability closet, when I was working for Accenture as a management consultant in Ireland. I have the condition ocular albinism, and I had made a decision at 17 when I discovered by accident about my condition, because my parents brought me up as a sighted child. They never disclosed to me that I was vision impaired, because they did not want my life limited by a disability or a label. And when I discovered, I didn't know how to handle it, and I went into the disability closet. 11 years later, came out when I was with Accenture, and that's how I began this work.
Yeah. So you are known as an activist and an agitator and a cultural warrior. How would you describe yourself?
Well, you know, it's taken me a really long time. So this year, in a few months, I'm going to be 50. And there's something really powerful about age and stage. And I guess I'm Caroline now. And for the first time in my life, I'm not defining myself by my work. It's part of who I am and what I do. For so long, I was defined by that bio that you read out. That's why I'm sort of allergic to bios now, because I realized I've pushed myself so hard, because through my work I thought I would be lovable, be valuable, and therefore I define myself by the work I did. And so I don't define myself by the work anymore, but I do tell you who I am. If you were to meet me, I think Nasser said it, I'm a big hugger. Yeah, I do love hugging, which is really hard in the COVID times, but I am a wild-hearted rebel, there's no doubt. I love to dance. I love human beings. I'm half introvert, half extrovert. I truly believe that, you know, I now am responsible for my life and making those changes happen. I I can't bear people who are negative. I love exercise. I love art and beauty and photography, even though I'm visually impaired. I love my family and my friends. And I think if you were to try and kind of conjure me up as a thing, I'm kind of like a firefly meets a cowgirl, meets a biker chick, and meets somebody with their arms spread out as far as she can.
You missed one important one. You might consider yourself visually impaired, but you're a visionary. And you're a great agent for change. So you're a great catalyst. And I've seen that in you, in everything you've done. And as I said, the things that you've achieved in 2 years, I must admit, it's taken me 30 years, and I've admitted that I'm not going to be able to do what you can do. So there you goes. Cards are down. I admit defeat compared to the most superior rival. There you go. You've really done a great work. And I think it wouldn't have happened if you didn't know, one, you can bring a change, and two, you can take people along with you. And I mean, well done to you.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of the people in this disability kind of area would certainly take their hat off to you, because you know the great guests we've had. You've got Suzanne Scott Parker, Kate Nash, and all. It's taken them years to get the movement to where it is, and there you come, a complete outsider almost, and then suddenly you take the world by storm and getting all these CEOs to sign up to something as important as committing to have it on a board agenda. I always think that first step is the hardest one, and you've managed to do that. So if you wanted an outsider's view, yeah, we're impressed.
She's got passion.
Yeah, passion is definitely
the first thing. I watched that TED talk that you did, that amazing TED talk. I think 2010, I think it was, and you blew the whole audience away because you walk in the stage, and I often describe it. I said there's this sassy blonde, and she's got her jeans on and her boots, and she's walking the stage, and she's saying all the things she's done. At no point do you know what she's going to say at the end, which is, and I'm blind. And the whole audience just goes, and including me. But when I was watching that TED talk, I was like, what? How? And I wasn't working for Microlink then. I was in Greece. I just happened to be watching TED Talks and came across you. Never in a million years would I think that I would be working for Microlink, meeting you, working in the field of disability. I mean, you were so inspirational, and yeah, that TED Talk was something else. How did it feel getting up on that stage? Because I mean, I've done a TED Talk. I did one in 2015. Well, I did a TEDx, not quite the same, but anyway. And it's really hard because you've got to remember everything you're going to say, and it's very prestigious, and your heart's racing. And that was 10 years ago, 11 years ago.
So, well, firstly, Nasser, I just wanted to say something back to you because it links into TED. I think there's a timing about when there's nothing more magical than an idea whose time has come. You know, you got to remember, I've been hustling this work with business and disability for 21 years. And it's been a long time. And I've worked and known so many people who in a way, that the Valuable 500 has become part of as well. So I didn't do this on my own, just making it really clear. And though the Valuable 500 was only launched 2.5 years ago, it was 7 failures and 2 decades in the making. So I need to fix that record. And then to TED, and I think this is a great way to lead into Anna. You know, that TED stage, if you watch the TED, I've never watched it because I can't. I was in an incredibly, incredibly dark period of my life. And to stand on that stage and try and
pretend,
be authentic, be totally authentic, because that's what I really am trying to do, and have the confidence was really hard. Mm-hmm. And they wanted me to rehearse, but I knew if I rehearsed, I wouldn't go on the stage. And I went out there, and I can say to this day, it was one of the most difficult things. I came off the stage and I self-annihilated, as many people do who speak. Everybody can relate to that. But I think there was a moment in that talk that I can say I'm living now, which is, I said, if I can remember, this is me, I am here, because I admitted I was struggling a bit. And I think what we see often on stages or on Zooms or through social media is very different to what's in reality. So it was an incredibly important moment in the journey for the work I do, an incredibly important moment for me. And then in some ways, it's the most vulnerable thing I have ever done in my life. It was so vulnerable. Yeah, but I'm very grateful for it. It gave me an incredible platform.
Yes, yeah, it did. But it was awesome. And I highly recommend that all of you go onto YouTube and or onto the TED site and watch it, because it is awesome. It's one of my favorites, and I watch TED Talks all the time. So and then imagine that, you know, all these years later, and I come to England and I work for NASA and in disability, which I've never known, and then I actually meet you. It's like mind blown. Like how does the world work like that?
Well, there's a lot of magic. I'd say NASA agrees. I think, and anybody out there as well who are sort of our tribe of people doing this, I think we've all got to believe in that serendipity and the magic that happens, particularly when you're trying to drive change. Because when you stop believing in those pieces of magic, these moments or these coincidences, like that's where the great stuff happens. For if your eyes are awake, if your eyes are open and you're awake to see them, there's no way I would be here with those kind of moments.
Yeah, it is magic.
My important question is, what do we do with it now? Because what you've done up to now is what was missing. I mean, you know, many years ago when I met Suzanne Scott Parker, I was so absolutely taken by her charisma, her insight about this and how she wanted to drive it. Then I've met other great people, Kate Nash and Diane Lightfoot. But then we get to a stage where you're preaching to the convert all the time. And then there are others out there who just can't see the light, if you pardon the expression. You just keep telling them, they said, yeah, great idea. But how do you manage to do that, though? That is a key kind of an ingredient I want to find from you. You went to America. You got so many Fortune 500 companies to sign up to this. And then you've done it in Southeast Asia, in Europe. So tell me, what is that secret ingredient?
Well, first of all, it's timing again. So I just want to be really clear, you know, it was really good timing. And don't give us credit for more than we're due. So it was timing and all the work that was done before us. And like, you must remember, I have been in the space a long time. But what I would say to you, truly, if you were to ask me what made the Valuable 500, and I was only allowed give one answer, I can say to you, it was using mostly my heart. And I know that sounds incredible, but this was heart-led. It was, and what I will say, the Valuable 500 has happened because of the intersection between the argument or case that is head-driven, that is the business case, blah. I still don't even know why we're making the business case for 15% of our global population. It's astounding to me. And then we were calling out the inclusion delusion that, you know, our companies who are claiming publicly to be passionate about inclusion do not include disability. I mean, that is a delusion. You cannot say you're inclusive if you're leaving people behind. So that's all the head stuff. And then we were talking about the market of, you know, 8 trillion and, you know, that we are a powerful force of insight and innovation. We have moved the dial of design through the centuries, literally. So that's the case. Okay, that's the head. But what I think was really powerful, it was combining it with the heart. Every single human being that we met along the way, we looked at them in the eye and it was really like, hold on a minute. This is your world. This is not about them, because disability touches every single human being's life at some point. And also if you for a moment think, if you don't have a lived experience yourself, well, think about how close that is to you. Stop putting it away in a category that you don't think is going to touch your life. Stop making excuses. And so when we started finding the heart and the head together, that is what drove it home. It was the stats and the story. It was never one or the other. And I can honestly say we appealed to the human being, whether it was the CEO, whether the chief diversity officer, whether it was the CHRO, it didn't matter. This is a human call. And you no longer can turn your back upon this. You can't have a reason. It's not acceptable to say anymore. Well, certainly now since COVID, well, this year we're going to focus on one area and not the other. I am a woman. I also have a disability. I am Irish. So which part of me do you want to do business with? It's insane. So I think that's it.
Very good. Amazing.
You know where we got to.
So my $1 million question is, you've got them to understand the human dimension, the importance of doing it. So in your experience, what's stopping them to actually go and fix this as a business challenge that they all have? Because, ignoring 20% of your market customers because you've never really considered accessibility, or maybe 20% of your workforce have a disability, you never even really thought about it that much. What do we do from here to go to the next quantum leap of saying, now let's fix it?
Well, I think there's a few things. One is the reason they didn't is truly because they didn't see the return on investment. And that's not the business case.
Right.
It was more to say, if we invest this amount of money or this amount of time in another area of an inclusion, we would get more back. Okay. So that was the first thing. The second thing was the lack of the CEOs to support and invest in the business. Without the CEO, you had nothing. I think it's Kate Nash's friend who, John Matthews, says leaders make choices, those choices create culture. So without the CEOs, which is why the Valuable 500 exists, nothing was going to change. Thirdly, honestly, I know this sounds crazy in this day and age, but there's still fear of getting it wrong, fear of getting canceled out, fear of not doing enough. And so because of that fear, it was like, well, I'll just turn my light and energy somewhere else because I'm just so scared. This is so complex. One word that means so much. And it's something I don't understand. So that's the other one. And then fourthly, from our experience is, the Valuable 500 was created on the death of my father. And I don't know if I would ever have had the courage to do it if he hadn't passed. And I have noticed that people sometimes, very often, handle disability, if they do not have a lived experience of it, in the same way they handle grief. We all know it's part of us, but we don't want to know because we don't want it. And so I think it's a combination of psychology and economics and safety. And absolutely, the fact that really bothers me is that we have 7% of our CEOs have a lived experience of disability, but 4 out of 5 of them are hiding like I did 20 years ago. So where is the disability voice? Did you know that in our FTSE 100 companies, guys, we do not have one leader who is declaring to have a lived experience. And we know mathematically that's not right. So you can hear all of those kind of combinations.
Very true. And in fact, one of the issues I've always had with disclosure and culture is that a lot of these people, the CEOs who make it to the top, they actually say, well, I've made it. I don't need to tell the world I'm disabled. However, what they don't tell you, they acquired it when they didn't need that kind of support. And I've spoken to many of them, but there are powerful people out there, like Ian Stewart from HSBC, who openly says, look, I've got 3 children who are disabled. And I'm ashamed to say that my bank is not good enough for them to join because we're not inclusive enough, even though he's one of the leading companies who's doing everything. So that kind of a lived experience is absolutely critical. And I think it's not because of sympathy, it's the fact that they know how much talent lies within those people that they have. So so you've opened the Pandora's box. So what do we do now?
Well, I think when you build a community that's so unique, and the stats around it, just to remind you again, it is 20 million employees, 36 countries, 64 sectors, 8 trillion in revenue. I mean, it's a phenomenal amount of power. And then the supply chains alone. I mean, so we have 500 companies and 500 CEOs and 500 board level commitments. But imagine the power of 500 supply chains. I don't even know how many companies that would be. So what is next? Well, we are going to mobilize this very unique collective. And what our ambition is to do in mobilizing these companies against a transformation program, which they designed for us. They told us what was in the way for them as leaders. Now, this is right to the C-suite, to change the system. They told us the problems. We created a transformation change program. I'm an ex-change management consultant. We did that. And we're going to mobilize those 500 companies. Now, if you can imagine one company doing something brilliant, that's great, but it ain't going to change the system. Not one CEO, not one company. But if you get a kind of a collective, then we could. So imagine 500 companies doing one thing in the same direction. That's like 500 shortcuts for system change. Now, how about 500 companies doing multiple things in multiple places, regardless of where they are, their maturity journey? That's where we start seeing a tipping point for system change. So that's what we're doing. And supporting us in that, what's very unusual about the Valuable 500, and I was so insistent upon this, because I had to remortgage my home and house to make the Valuable 500 happen, didn't pay ourselves anything. It was just so hard. But I did not want to charge the companies to be part of the Valuable 500. Not because I didn't think we were valuable, but because I wanted whatever resource they had will go into organizations like Microlink or Business Disability Forum or Purple or Purple Light, or all of the organizations around the world, right? So we have a huge investment by the Nippon Foundation to pay for our team. So no company pays a membership fee. And then we have 13 iconic companies who are helping co-finance and co-build some of the solutions that they've identified as problems.
Amazing. And that I read your previous update and quite impressed, because you're right about there is the head tells you, yes, we want it, but somebody says, I don't have the money to pay for it, so I won't join it because of that, even though they realize it's important. Do you find that disconnect between the top and the bottom of the organization still?
Yes. Can I just say, we never had one CEO say no. And this is what I'd say, it's the business that said no. And the reason the business said no is because they're already overwhelmed. And let's be honest, they're not at the very top of the business. So they're not sure that aligning themselves to disability will be good for their career, or an overburdened agenda anyway. And so what's that going to give them? And actually, because they didn't know, similarly to the CEOs, they just didn't know, where do I begin? What do I do? Is this, how am I going to get this right? So I think that is the disconnect. That being said, I want to kind of point out, I guess many people who are listening to this will agree, the best example of best practice that we ever witness is in small and medium firms, for sure. And then it seems to kind of, I don't know what happens when they get really big. So the Valuable 500 companies had to employ at least 1,000 people. And what what I'm starting to see now is that the company's conversation is shifting, that they're seeing that if they don't become learned and experienced or begin the journey of disability business inclusion, their company, their brand, and their career are facing risk. So now we're starting to talk about risk. So that's very interesting. And that's right throughout the business. So whether it's the CEO or the middle management, it's everybody starting to talk about risk proofing and not reacting, not responding intelligently to groups of humanity that they may have overlooked.
Something that we could, I can share with you is my experience, starting all those years ago. Absolutely, you were spot on. Most people didn't know it was a problem. No. Yeah, small, tiny number, 1% of my workforce, or small number of disabled people, elderly and all. But however, the second barrier I found they said, okay, some realize there is a problem, so we don't know what to do about it. So again, you came back with this fear of getting it wrong. And then that has been shifted because of the likes of Business Disability Forum and Purple Space, and certainly your campaign has opened up everybody's eyes about the importance and maybe ease of doing it. The final piece, which I always found was a barrier, is still a barrier. I'm not sure if we can afford it. So that's the really worst one, because when you start highlighting, money has been already spent and lost in other areas where if you put it into the right, you could not only fix a problem, actually save money. That's when you start actually seeing crossover of responsibilities in people not actually talking to each other. I've spoken to really serious business leaders saying that, well, I know we haven't got budget for this. We said, well, we've got budget for recruiting people after they've left your organization. You've got people actually suing the company for not getting the support they need. You've got productivity loss. Couldn't you put them into one pot? It's not that simple. So that's a kind of a
well,
mindset.
actually, it is that simple, because you know what the truth of it is, you can't afford not to anymore. The corporate world can't. And my point to anybody is, look, the worst we have seen of our world in what's happened in COVID, and particularly affecting the disability community. But you know, the other part is the lies that we saw. No, it's not that simple. We can't. Well, guess what? You can. That system changed. It changed, and it flexed, and it did it in a week, if not 10 days. And you told us it was all too difficult to do remote working. No, it wasn't. And actually, the ways in which you've worked are ways that people with disabilities and experience have brought to the table to make it easy for you. So now it's kind of like, you know what? Emperor's new clothes. I don't want to hear your excuses anymore. And when I began this work 21 years ago, this is no joke, when my very first campaign, this is what I got. I wrote off to hundreds of companies in Ireland, because I'm based in Ireland at the time. And they were like, we don't do disability. Can you imagine that? We don't do disability, really? And then when we started the Valuable 500, this is what we got. Oh, no, we do disability, but it's just not our focus area because we can't afford it. Now we're in 2021, and I just look at them and going, well, you are going to take a really big risk if you come out with one of those kind of statements, right? Because it's just, you can't actually say that anymore. So,
one of those skeptical companies, I could say about 3 years ago, we can't make changes, blah. Recently, I spoke to the head of their IT, and one of the most really embracing and inclusive. He said, overnight, we had to make up to about 100,000 or 200,000 adjustments overnight because of pandemic. Just imagine we struggled to do one off for a person where they've flexible. He said, look, this was an excuse. Now we know. Now they're saying we're not doing enough. What can we do? How can we accelerate this to actually to get where we want to be? So you're absolutely right in that respect. And I think as that critical mass has reached, the next part is expectation. How do we start helping, measuring, and trying to make sure people are following the journey and they're not going to just drop out?
Oh yeah, I think one of the things that and I can completely understand that people might have been skeptical. They were like going, yeah, like, is this Valuable 500 thing, some tick box and some blah, blah, blah. Well, first off, no company got into the Valuable 500 without being completely vetted by several members of our team. You have no idea how hard this work was. It was hard. And we wanted to stand and be able to look at anybody in the eye and be accountable. Companies that do not achieve their commitment will be kicked out of the Valuable 500. And that's just an agreement. That's, you know, you either do what you say you're going to do or bye-bye, because you're not part of our community, because the community is only as strong as it is. But the other part of it is, as we move into phase 2, every organization will work with, they will have a relationship manager to ensure that they continue their journey, for us to ensure that we start signposting to organizations like yours, because they're going, okay, what can we do more of now? And you're going, right, well, you can talk to A, B, C, D, because we're not doing it as a Valuable 500. We are the conveners. We are the connectors. We're the catalysts. We're not the consultants. So we kind of push that way. But one of the things that I am particularly passionate about is the issue of reporting and targets, because honestly, it is appalling, the lack of disability metrics that are in sustainability indexes, that are in diversity and inclusion indexes, that are in business performance. It's actually criminal. Do you know? And you're like, how on earth could you ever say that you're a sustainable company if you don't have these metrics included? So one of the pieces for us that it will be, we have metrics and targets for the Valuable 500, what it looks like for our success in 3 years. But what we would say is if we could get at least 20% of the big, you know, powerful programs or tools that business work towards, insert and integrate disability metrics into that, that will be good, because what gets measured gets done. I know it's a cliche, but it does. And then what are we going to get our companies to report on? Because they come back to us and go, oh, but you know, we can't report on how many people have disabilities because it's against the legislation. Understand that, but you can report against something else. You can tell me how much you're willing to invest in it, who's in charge of it, where are the policies. Just because you can't do that piece does not mean you can't do something else. No. So reporting and data is essential. It's essential.
But to us, the most critical component of that disability inclusion is what you do for, when it comes to customers, is obviously how accessible is your offering. Are you designing your products accessible? Is your website accessible? Is your building accessible? That's quite easily measurable, because we know 90% of companies are not accessible. Even
well, actually,
today.
Can you believe it? 1 in 3 of our FTSE 100 companies still do not have accessible websites. How is that, Nasser? How is that in 2021? 1 in 3. Are you mad? Do you want to just put a match to the potential profit that you're losing?
That's
Crazy.
One thing. That's actually what the false assumption is, that disabled people, they're not really the people we need to go after, because they don't have any money. Wrong, because baby boomers are all disabled now, almost as very old age ones, and they're the ones with deepest pocket, and they've got families. So if you lose those, you're going to lose their family as well. But
which is 70% of, just let's remind ourselves, which is 70% of our global economy. And when you say that to a CEO, they're like, no, that's not true. And I said, it is true.
Look it up. Absolutely right.
It is true. This is 70. I mean, you hear Diane Lightfoot saying 70% of our global economy. What on earth are you doing? So it may not be the individual, but it's affected to the family member. So I have a vision impairment. My husband is in my life. My stepchildren are in my life. They're affected by me. It's just crazy.
And the second part, which is the workforce. Now we know people who are disabled. I mean, companies sometimes hold on to staff because it's too much trouble to get rid of them if they don't have a good policy, and they pay their salary years and years, but not getting anything out of them. Just making those tiny adjustments, you could bring somebody back, increase their productivity not by 2 percentage points, by 100%, except they spend millions on various programs, which I'm not saying should be
of getting sued.
But that is exactly. So I think when we look at that workplace adjustment product, it's actually the most basic component, but it is so badly done or not done, as the case may be. And I think if you want to get to that utopia of companies to be inclusive, we need to get every country, every territory that these companies are operating in, to have an infrastructure to get that basic, a mouse that which is special for someone with RSI, or a keyboard that is good for someone who is blind or visually impaired. That these are the things that up to now hasn't come up. Now, hopefully, with the help of Valuable 500, with ILO and Business Disability Forum, the global, we can actually get these organizations to come together, say, okay, we want to go live in some territories like India or Brazil. Let's do it together. Let's not just do it in isolation, because this is no different to go into a place to want to sell computers, but there are no manufacturers, there is no supply chain. So I think that's where we want to work as a global family, trying to resolve those tiny issues, and those tiny issues can have a massive impact on the agenda that we want to deliver. So my question to you, where is the low-hanging fruit that we could actually go and tackle immediately? What's the quick wins that we can do even from tomorrow, going to all our clients and contacts and big companies? What can they do one step that, apart from signing up, is to make a difference? Well,
the Valuable 500 is closed. So from our perspective, we're closed. But I think what is really important for all of us is to take advantage of this moment. Mm-hmm. This moment of when we've been exposed to the gross inequity that has mm-hmm. existed. But I also think to the opportunity, come on, we have to recover. So we're going to have to recover in a sustainable, inclusive way. Mm-hmm. What on earth excuse could a business say? They're just going, no, I don't want to do disability. So I think if I was in any company, regardless of the scale, the size, whether it's a private sector, public sector, whatever else, is that we realize right now that no recovery is possible without 20% of our population touched, and with mum and dads, as we know, 70%. But the piece that we can do is to start speaking to this, start speaking about this. We know that through COVID, just for the very small point is our use of technology has gone up 30%. It's accelerated. And when everything we're going to be doing is through digital, right? So are your organizations, go and look at every single thing, the touch point of your organizations, start that accessibility journey, because accessibility is no longer niche. This is normal. This is going to be as important. I mean, I don't know how to compare this to, but I mean, basic health and safety, like this, you can't not do this. And I think that's the make it relevant, because the more relevant and the more accessible it is, the more understandable it is. You're not having to fight for it. You know what I mean? So I think that's the place. It's use this moment, use this time. And why on earth would you have barriers keeping clients away or customers away? Why would you do that? And I think that's the piece we've always been, you talked about customer, and the Valuable 500 was always about the supply chain. It's not just about talent and employment. It's about suppliers. It's about customers. It's about the full ecosystem. I think this is our moment to start pushing and saying, do we have gaps that we didn't even know we had? And that, let's go back to that the FTSE 100. How on earth are they justifying that? And I think they're not justifying it because they couldn't justify it because they're bad people. They just don't know. They just don't know.
Do you think the shareholders have a responsibility of putting pressure?
Yeah, I do. I really do. And I think we're starting to see the green shoots. I'd love to hear what other people have to say, but we're starting to see the green shoots of where the investor community are starting to demand to see how a company, no matter how small or large it is, are their sustainability policies? What is the policies around inclusion? Where is disability? It's finally started to come. We've seen it happen with green. We've seen it happen a little bit with gender. Now we're starting to see a full broad spectrum that investors will invest in organizations that have the evidence to prove that they are on the journey of inclusion and sustainability.
Well, that's actually music to my ears. And the second very important question, how important is well-being after the pandemic? Because disability is ultimately the end point of poor health and poor well-being. But then if you get one right, you get the other one right too. And all these complex issues with mental health and physical health, working from home, and these are going to come together as a perfect storm. So how do you think the big companies are reacting to this?
Well, so I can give you just personal anecdotes. So I'm involved I sit on the diversity councils for both L'Oreal and for Sky. And what they're doing is bringing together the lived experience of the vast array of humanity. So it's not just kind of pigeonholing and that person has a Black lived experience and that has a disability lived experience. They're really trying to understand a holistic view of inclusion. And within that is around well-being, to your point. I actually think how inclusion is going to be framed. So it's been known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think we're going to eventually see that drop into well-being and inclusion, belonging, well-being, and inclusion. These are words that are being used. So it's in a broader field than simply diversity, which sat under CHROs or the HR managers. This is actually going to be the responsibility of the boards. It's going to be strategic, and that's why it's so important. And it's going to be cross-functional. It will come out of HR. So the well-being of your teams is a cultural issue, and it is strategically important. And where does the importance of that get led from the top? And that's within budgets and how much attention it gets. But we're seeing that it's merging together. So remember years ago, we spoke about CSR and then it moved to sustainability. I think we're starting to see a broader conversation of diversity, inclusion, belonging, and well-being, which is going to be very powerful for everyone.
I couldn't let you go without asking another question. In order to get this whole disability right, we got to go to the source. The source of all this 1.2 billion disabled people is our education, poor education. How do we make that inclusive so we don't feed more people excluded from job markets? You know, there are kids who lose their hearing at the age of 3 in some of the developing countries. That excludes them from education, never mind future income. We need big corporations to actually focus on the education, but so hugely underfunded at the moment. The UN has got a massive budget gap, and they don't know how to fill it. And they need companies to be involved to take that as a priority in their strategy for future, because these are future customers they'll be investing in.
And our future talent and our future leaders.
Yeah.
I mean, I won't ever talk about something that I don't know about. And education, other than I'm very lucky and privileged to have had a great education. And I know that because with my condition, if I was born in countries in Africa, you know, people with ocular albinism or albinism are being accused of spreading the pandemic or creating the pandemic and are being killed.
God.
Do you know what I mean? So like this, I just happened to be born in Ireland. I happened to be lucky enough to have access to a great education. And that is the defining difference. So you're absolutely right. So what can we bring to bear? Well, when we see companies invest in philanthropically or through their foundations in education programs. And this is one thing we do from the Valuable 500. We say, okay, so you have an education program. Is that an education for all children? And they're like, oh yeah, it is. And I said, really? So when you're putting your philanthropic and foundation money against an education program, are you thinking of the child that has a different lived experience?
Yeah.
Because therefore you're having an exclusive education program, not an inclusive one. If we look at development aid and they're putting their philanthropic pound or dollar to that, are they doing that inclusively? Are they really thinking about these great lines that we say, no one left behind, all and everyone? Well, actually, all and everyone often never included us. And, you know, Anna said, as I came on, I've just taken up the role of being the president of the IAPB, which is the International Association for the Prevention of Blindness. And I just want to take a moment here. It is hard enough trying to create an equitable world for people with lived experience and disability. There are 1.1 billion people right now who have preventable sight loss. Now, that is insane to me, Nasser. And where the education system and the companies can come into place is, why are we not making sure young children have eye tests, you know, as soon as they can into schools? Why are we not ensuring that in companies? Why are we not having companies pay for that? That's just a small example of the lack of connected thinking that goes on.
Do you know what the good news is? It's now possible using remote technology,
yes,
mobile phones, and it's so cheap. So cheap.
Yes.
And I definitely want to bring that passion of yours to the Global Business Coalition for Global Coalition for Business. Is part of a UN. Gordon Brown, Sarah Brown are running it, and they're constantly talking about gap in the education funding. And I said, look after the most needy. Everybody else will benefit, not the other way around. So start asking people to fix those preventable diseases like hearing loss, visual loss. Then you'll find 100, 200 million kids immediately will have a future.
Could I just give you one of the things that I learned, because there's some very exciting news coming out about vision loss and integrating eye care into healthcare. Do you know that this preventable sight loss or loss of vision is costing our global economy 411 billion? And we can fix that. And Nasser, we could fix that. And the only reason we don't fix that is we don't have joined up thinking. We are not looking at interconnectedness, and the intention isn't there.
I tell you what, I can believe you, because at the age of 16, I was complete failure in my education because of my eye loss, the sight loss. And with an intervention, I managed to get through my education, got a job. I think to date, we've done around £300 million worth of business, employed so many, and helped more than 400,000 people. That return on investment is massive, because I had the support of my family. I had a good education, managed to get there. So I think this is, you're absolutely right. It's not the cost or giving human life some purpose. You've actually generated a lot more income from it to help the world. I think I've got to shut up and let Anna ask questions.
Well, kind of, because we've only got 9 minutes left.
Go on, ask questions.
There are some questions. So Helen de Breton asks, how did you get the meetings with the right people? How did you do that?
Helen, it all began with one. When you're doing something like this, and people told me that I was ludicrous if we could have the valuable 500. Like, who did I think I was? And my heart, as I said, was broken for my father. So grief was channeled well. I knew I needed to get to a very influential first follower. And I wanted it to be Paul Polman, who was the CEO of Unilever, because they're not going to listen to the Irish woman with, you know, sparkly wings on her back and, you know, trucking along. So I met him on the main stage of One Young World by complete magic chance, by the way. And that's what I tell you about magic. And it was working with him. It was convincing him first. And he really was the father CEO of sustainability. So he knew what it's like to try and make system change happen. So it was challenging one first and using the influence of one. And one then became Richard Branson, Jeff Dodds from Virgin Media. Jeff Dodds, then it went into Omnicom with Janet Riccio. And there you can see it grow. And that's how it happened. Leaders influence leaders.
Well, there you are, Helen. Now you know what you've got to do. Get out there and find that one, and then it.
Well, we have many. I think the journey is actually becoming more fun now. Yeah, and thanks for Caroline for paving the way for us, because we are getting more. We're getting more and more CEOs really getting interested, and certainly the leadership engagement, the champions are actually increasing. So
we've got a comment here from Jodie Greer. So sadly, it takes pressure too. We didn't see much from companies on anti-racism, and yet within a week of George Floyd's death, we saw a majority of large companies very explicitly standing up and stating they support BLM across all available channels. They can be inclusive. They can be explicit about it. It just takes commitment and some effort.
Jodie, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that the issue of the killing of George Floyd, can you see when these crisis hit, like the pandemic, the system could change. When this appalling act happened to George Floyd, they came up, well, I don't want to wait for something appalling to happen around disability. Somebody shouldn't die, or many, many people shouldn't die, for the value of this population to be recognized. And so I think businesses are starting to understand that this is a huge demographic that they would be ridiculous to ignore. And so the intention, if we can capture the intention of a collective mass of CEOs, we hopefully can trickle it down.
Neil Eustace as well. Hello, Neil. So many people still want to hear the financial case for building in accessibility at design stage versus the extensive cost of trying to retrofit after people complain. Everyone on this call knows why we should do it for a multitude of reasons, but you still come across those who ask numbers and costs.
Well, look, I think that happens in everything, doesn't it, Neil? Like it's a very typical thing, but I'd love to hear what you used to say, but I think it's changing. Was before we used to say, look, why am I making the case? Would you just look at Apple? Like, honestly, you know, design-led thinking, baked in universal or design for all from the very beginning, because the more we do that, the more customers we have and the more customers we're going to retain. But you're right. There's always going to be the engineer, right brain thinker. But now I am so less inclined because I'm just like, you know what? I don't have to convince you. You could be the fifth Beatle if you want to or not. The world is changing. Accessibility is here. It is not a choice. It is not about if you do it, it's when you do it. And actually the cost of not doing it, because you are literally letting 13 billion in the UK click away underneath your eyes because you're not having accessibility.
Actually, I don't think it is the reason, it's the excuse, because people don't know what to do or how to do it. So they said, well, it might cost too much. We did a case study for Lloyds Bank, and we showed that the cost of looking after the stability of all your employees across the organization is less than the price of a cup of coffee per week per employee. It's not
it's the 6 inches. It's the 6 inches between our ears that is getting in the way. It's our old archaic thinking and stereotypes that put that on. So Neil, you got to do a bit of both. But I think it's having confidence in saying, look, in a way, your choice. Like it's your choice.
So I've got 2 more things I want to read. Okay, 2 more. Okay.
So by the way, Neil says, I always enjoy listening to Caroline. So that's
Thank you, Neil.
Everybody does. So Sarah Slattery Margot. The inclusion challenge for non-speaking individuals is incredible.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Education is exclusive only to those children, adults who are high functioning and verbal. Inclusive education is an incredible gap in the US in the largest cities and often non-existent in smaller communities.
Can I just say, I would agree. You know, it's interesting when people say where are the greatest challenges. I think the non-verbal challenge is huge. Yeah, I think it is absolutely huge. Of everything, right? And so it will be really interesting to see where the technology advances are coming and how they are going to help. But I totally agree with you. I think that's the hardest challenge of all, definitely.
So the last one is from Stavrula Papayorgaki, and actually I'm gonna ask Azadeh to put Stavi live because I wanted to speak to you because there's a little bit of a story she's got to tell you just for 1 minute. But she says, I'm currently writing a thesis on moving disability up the corporate governance agenda on FTSE companies, exactly what you are discussing. And when the legislative framework does not support reporting, you change the legal framework. The move has started. Thank you for being awesome. And we got Stavi on the line because I know she wants to say something to you.
Hello. I don't know if you can see me, actually. I don't know if there is a camera.
I don't know if they can put the camera on as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wearing a jumper, but it's fine.
It doesn't matter. I can't see you, Stavi, so that's good.
I can see you.
Yourself out.
I just wanted to say, I work for Microlink. I've worked for Microlink for the past 20 years, 19 years. And except of the fact that I am actually writing a dissertation on moving disability up the corporate governance agenda for FTSE companies right now. So everything you say to me right now, I'm absolutely, you know, I'm there with you. And I'm saying if they don't want to report, let's make them report. Let's go to the policymakers. Let's go to the government. Let's make them do it. Let's change the legislative framework so they have to do it. So that's one side of me. And the other side of me that I wanted you to know about is the fact that I'm also the mother of a 7-year-old daughter, Sophia, who is severely visually impaired. She's considered blind. And, you know, on those first days of realizing that this is going to be your journey of motherhood, Anna very kindly forwarded me your TED talk. And, you know, I'm getting goosebumps even talking to you right now and talking about this. But when I heard it, it was the days that I was trying to decide the kind of mother I'm going to be and how I'm going to do this. And I knew I was coming from a very privileged background of working for Microlink and knowing everything about disabilities and assistive technology. But that TED talk of yours, and, you know, it kind of shaped and helped me decide the kind of mother I was going to be. So I just wanted to say thank you for being there and thank you for doing it. And to just tell you there's always another aspect. I know it was probably quite dark for you doing it, but you help people in different ways that you wouldn't know. So just saying, I'm very glad to meet you and just to say thank you for the words you said. That's all.
That's why I had to save her till the end.
And that's when she would have hugged you, but I know she's desperately trying to reach out. But Caroline, you are honestly, you're an inspiration. I've said it to many people in many times, and I don't know how to thank you for giving up your time to be here today. It's 3 o'clock.
No. Thank you for the conversation, and Stavi, thank you.
We're gonna be stalking you, if that's the word, because we know. On the coat trail of Caroline, we're going to make the world a better place in our own way. So thank you.
All together.
And a bunch of flowers and a big hug from me.
No, well, the big hug, that's all I care about.
Lunch is on me next time we're in London together.
Thank you.
All right, take care,
Thank
Caroline.
you, everyone.
Thank you, Caroline. Love you.
We didn't give you a chance to do a closing statement, but I'm sure that tear actually...
Stavi did it.
Yeah, I think that tear actually gave it over.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, everyone. And this is last of the current series, and I'm sure we'll be coming back with other themes and other important areas. But meanwhile, thank you to all our guests, and particularly the last and the best friend, Caroline Casey, and wish you to go to the next level, 5,000. Make it put a 0. 0 is not too big. Zero is no number. Put a zero next to it. Make it a valuable 5,000. Thank you.
Thanks,
God
Caroline.
bless.
Stay
God
well.
bless.
Be happy.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.